Now, this lesson is going to be about how to write the essay for the AP exam, which is coming up on the 13th, so we're getting kind of close. So I wrote an essay on the rise of Silas Lapham, just like you had done. The first step I did was I carefully read the question. And I started to think, ask questions about the question: who, what, where, when, why, and how. These are where you're going to get your ideas. And these key words, what are the key words in the question? These need to be in my thesis statement. If your thesis statement fails to address the question, then your whole essay is wrong, just to start off with. If you can't do that, these simple steps, then you're not answering the question. Okay, step one, read the question. If you don't answer the question, your essay is wrong, just to start off with. Carefully read the following excerpt from William Dean Howe's novel, The Rise of Silas Lapham. Then, in a well-constructed essay, analyze how the author portrays the complex experience of two sisters, Penelope and Irene, within their family and society, and how this characterization affects the work as a whole. You may wish to consider such literary elements as style, tone, and selection of detail. Now notice it says, may wish to consider. That doesn't mean it has to be in your essay. May is optional. So when I get to selection of detail, I'm like, what is that? That's pretty broad in general. I think I would probably avoid that. Tone, okay, I can do tone. Tone makes mood. The style, that's the diction, perhaps that. But characterization, definitely. So in my thesis statement, I need to have my author and the title. Then what I do is I analyze the verbs and the nouns that are in the question. So we have analyze, author portrays. How does an author portray the characters? Characterization. Complex experience. So the word complex indicates a tone of difficulty with the sisters in their family and society. So I'm looking for some type of difficulty that these sisters experience within family and society. Then characterization. The characterization affects the work as a whole, because as the author develops the characters, this affects the work, and that's through the entirety. What literary devices? Well, we got characterization, tone makes mood, and figurative language, similes, metaphors, and so forth. So I'm already thinking and asking myself questions on what I can write this, how I put this essay together, what literary devices I'm going to use, because I'm thinking, I'm analyzing, what is it that the question asks? All right, now I'm ready to make my thesis statement. I could use the interpretive sentence chart or my who, what, where, when, why, and how technique. And in this case, that's what I did. So who? William Dean Howes. What? Characterizes complicated interaction. What is the interaction? Complication. Well, we had discussed the plot, and part of the plot is conflict. Where? The rise of Silas Lapham and the environment in which they're living. When? Characterization techniques. Why? To reveal the theme and affect the work as a whole. How's he doing it? Tone, figurative language, and mood. So now I have questions and answers that I can put together to make my thesis. The answers to the questions are words and ideas that come directly from the question. So here's my thesis statement. In his novel, The Rise of Silas Lapham, William Dean Howes uses characterization to reveal the complicated interaction of two sisters, Penelope and Irene, within their family and the society in which they live. The conflict of the portrayal creates a mood that affects the work as a whole. So when I look at my thesis statement, does it have all the ideas that the question asked? Well, I have the two sisters, characterization, society, family, and the mood affects the work as a whole. Okay, that's good. Let's finish my introduction. Broad general statement. People tend to behave differently when in public. Restate the big ideal, narrow it down. The persona of an individual can be quite different when around the family. All right, so I have my introductory paragraph done before I even wrote anything else, maybe even before I even read the selection, because all it is the information that's in the question itself. The ideas in the question are in my thesis statement. That's it. That's how easy it is. But if you don't do that, okay, now that I have my thesis statement done, my introductory paragraph done, what I want to think about is what are the literary techniques that I'm going to be using? In this case, it's characterization. From one of the previous lessons we had, characterization is direct comment by the narrator, revealing a character's thoughts and motivations, dialogue of a character, the actions of a character, and what one character says about another. So I want to focus on the literary techniques that the author's using. And in this case, I said the focus is characterization. This is where I need to think. So now I'm ready to read my the selection that they gave me. I already have my introductory paragraph done, so that's quick. That's just from reading the question. And now what I'm doing is I'm looking for the ideas or the examples that show conflict from family and conflict in society. This is where I'm going to take my notes and I'm going to think. Remember, we talked about being an active reader. Active reader has a purpose. I know what my purpose is. As I read this, what is the conflict between the two sisters and their society? Now, as I'm reading now, I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the conflict in the family, conflict in society. So I take notes as I read. And remember, you're only going to have 40 minutes to do all of this and 5 minutes to upload it. It's going to be tight. So the family is isolated and content. They're naive. These are the inferences I can make as I'm reading. The two girls are battling for the mother's attention. Intimidated, satisfied. The conflict is the sisters adore the mother. Irene buys her clothes. Penelope self-guided and self-improvement, and the matter of talk for the whole family. The one sister complains that chases away men. So wholly that she depended on her mother and her sister for opinions. Irene developed his own opinion and was often a mistake. And I say, well, who said that? The narrator said that, but whose thought was that? That's tone, the author's tone, his attitude towards it. In society, they weren't abandoned to embroidery, which means perhaps other women, young women of their age were. They would sit at the window and discuss what they saw. There was a great divide between the young girls and the other students who went to the dance party, and they didn't take the private classes. The father didn't like company. The mother remained too rustic. They didn't go to Europe, but they did go to the mountains and the seaside. They had no skill or courage to make themselves noticed. They lurked helplessly. Their bond was a barrier to worldly knowledge. They lived richly to themselves and didn't know how to do otherwise. So these are the notes I took as I read, and I'm thinking conflict. What is the conflict between the family and society, the two girls? Now, all the time that I'm taking my notes and I'm reading through this, I'm thinking plot, the plot of a story. We have our exposition, the setting, characters, and conflict are introduced. The rising action, events that create suspense and interest and tension. The climax, the point of the conflict or the crisis, it reaches its peak. The falling action conflict moves to resolution, and the denouement is the resolution of the conflict. So this is what I'm thinking about, the plot of a story as I'm reading this section. Conflict, that's the idea that I got from the question. Between the two sisters and between the sisters in society. So now that I have my notes, I went through and read it, I'm thinking about the plot of the story, specifically conflict, and between the sisters and the sisters in society, because I'm thinking. I'm taking all the things that we work with all year long and I'm putting it in one spot right here. All right, now, the conflict between the sisters. We have examples in the text, and what I need to do is make inferences. Not what the author said, but what I can deduce from what the author said. So, of whom both daughters made a kind of idol. So the two daughters idolized the mother. Irene spent her abundant leisure shopping for herself and her lying mother. So Irene spends all her time buying her mother's clothes that she can't even wear. So what this says to me is that she's vying for her mother's attention. Hey, Mom, look, I got you a new present. Author didn't say that. That's an inference. Buying her caps, laces out of the pin money and getting her dresses far beyond her capacity to wear. She's trying to get her mother's attention. Irene complained that Penelope scared away the young men they got acquainted with at the dance and sociables. So here the word complained, the tone of the author is negative. The inference that I can draw from that is that Irene doesn't like her sister in this aspect. What else? Irene dressed herself very stylishly, spent hours on the toilet every day, so she primping up all the time. Her sister had a simpler taste, and if she had done altogether as she liked, she might even have slighted dress. So we see two different ways that the women behave. This is a conflict, opposite. And usually came home from a comic account of them, and that made more matter of talk for the whole family. So Penelope goes out and she goes to all these lectures. Then she comes home and she makes fun of everybody, and she's the center of attention. It says that more matter of talk for the whole family. So everybody would sit around and listen to Penelope talk. But what about Irene? She just sat there. And again, so wholly she depended on her mother and her sister for her opinions. It seems to me that when she was younger, this happened, but now that she's getting older and she doesn't like it. Began for the first time to form ideas which she had not derived from a family, and they were none the less her own because they were often mistaken. So here we see the young girl, Irene. She had been talking to a young man. So she was actually going out into society, trying anyway, making mistakes because she's young. Her family didn't. And they're competing. You have two different ways. Penelope dominates the whole conversation, and her mother obviously likes it because they do it all the time. Irene feels kind of left out, so she goes out and buys her mother's clothes. So the inference I can make is the conflict between these two sisters has to deal with their place within the family. Irene's growing up. She's no longer the little girl anymore, and now she's becoming a young woman and she wants to break out. Her sister is the opposite. That's the conflict. That's an inference that I make as I read. Now I continue this exercise thinking about the conflict between the sisters in society, and I make inferences based upon what the author says. If you just state what the author says and that's it, that's not going to get you a good score on the AP exam. It's the commentary, the inferences that you make based upon the examples that you use. So here we find that the father does not like company and the mother is too rustic. So what this tells me is that they're in high society. They weren't always there. Rustic means like they were out in the woods somewhere. So somehow they came within money and moved into this society that they're not used to. But the mother still is like Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. If you've never seen the Beverly Hillbillies, go on YouTube and watch it. It's one of the funniest shows you'll ever see. But they had not belonged to the private classes. They did not even know of them, and a great gulf divided them from those who did. Conflict. They didn't even know about these private classes. They would go to the mountains and the seaside, but the Latins had no skill or courage to make themselves noticed. So they just sat back. So you can imagine if they were the hillbillies and they moved into the Beverly Hillbillies, and we're on kind of, sitting around. That's me and my wife were watching the Beverly Hillbillies. It's funny. So I'm using that as an analogy. So they have no class, no style, and here they are with all this wealth, and they're sitting and looking around, and they're out of place. That's the family. And then it says they lurked helplessly. Look at the tone. Hey, helplessly. I can write about tone. That's a word that indicates a negative attitude towards the family and creates a mood of compassion for them because they did not know how to do otherwise. The elder daughter did not care for society, apparently. The younger, who was but 3 years younger, was not yet quite old enough to be ambitious about it. All right, so the elder daughter didn't like society. She would go out to all these lectures and come home and make fun of everybody. The younger girl wasn't able to participate in the conversation, so that's that conflict. And then we have the conflict here with the society, that she didn't like society anyway. Where did she get this idea of not liking society? From her parents, the way she grew up. They were the Beverly Hillbillies out in the sticks and all this. That's the way the older girl was raised. And then they moved into the high society because they got money somehow and they felt out of place and she didn't like it. But the younger girl was kind of in between. Now she's getting older, so she went out and tried at least to talk to this young guy. These are all inferences that I make based upon what I read. The author didn't say it, but based upon the characterization and the tone that was used, these are inferences that I can make. So as you're reading and taking notes, these are the thoughts that go through your mind. Cut. Now, we had talked earlier in the year, if you begin to write your essay from the beginning and move all the way to the end, it's probably going to be pretty bad. Don't do that. Plan it. So now I have my thesis statement and pretty much my introductory paragraph is done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to have 2 body paragraphs, one about the society conflict and the other one about the sister conflict. Make these first, then you provide your examples, and I'll show you why. So again, who, what, where, when, why, and how. The reason you have to do this is because it focuses the ideas back to my thesis statement. If you don't do that and your topic sentence is off topic, it's wrong. Then the whole paragraph is wrong because it doesn't explain your thesis statement, doesn't support it in any way. So who is how's. What? Portrays the characters Irene and Penelope. Where? Separate from the norms of society. When? Describing how not abandoned to needlework. Create an inference that shows separation. And they do it by direct comment of the narrator. So my ideal here is that these 2 girls are separate from society. And now I'm going to provide examples as to why. So, to begin, hey, I gave you a whole sheet of transitional phrases. You don't need all of the transitional phrases, but on a separate sheet of paper, since you're allowed to use notes, write them out. They'll be right there. Use them. If you don't incorporate those transitional phrases in your essay, it's just lazy. So here's my topic sentence. And I did the who, what, where, when, why, and how, but it just quickly went into an example and a comment right away. When that happens, great, go with it. So to begin, How's indicates that through direct comment by the narrator that the two sisters are separate from societal norms. Okay, that's my topic sentence. Now I'm going to look for specific examples and comment on those examples. He writes, they were not girls who embroidered or abandoned themselves to needlework. Okay. What am I going to write about? This is characterization, direct comment by the narrator, which I indicated in my topic sentence, which refers specifically back to my thesis sentence of how these girls are characterized and to develop the conflict. Here, the tone of separation is inferred. It doesn't say they're separated. It's an inference. That's good commentary. It can be deduced that most young girls of the time would have abandoned themselves to such activities. This hints at a conflict that is further revealed through the characterization of Irene and Penelope and their family. S-E-C. Notice that my comment is not one sentence. It's more than one sentence. Let's continue. So now that I have this, and the example and the comment just came like that, so I just went with it. But after I make my topic sentence, I want to ask myself some questions. What examples of characterization reveal the conflict between the sisters and society? Okay, well, the father doesn't like company, the mother's too rustic. They didn't go to the private classes and created a gulf. They lurked helplessly while on vacation. The strength of the family was a barrier to the world. Penelope didn't like society, and Irene was too young. That's a lot. So I can't use all of them. I only have 40 minutes to write this essay. So these are the ideas I took from my notes, and now I have to pare them down because I only have 40 minutes. Introduction, to body, and the conclusion. That's it. The next thing I'm going to do is create the topic sentence for my second body paragraph. I'm not going to go and write that first paragraph just yet. By using these techniques that I'm showing you, it's fast. I can write both of these topic sentences in like 3 minutes because I'm using who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I'm thinking. Who, how's, what characterizes conflict between the sisters through their actions and comment. It's an inferred conflict. It doesn't say it, so it's an inference. And direct comment by the narrator. So I take these ideas, which are the ideas that are in my thesis statement. If your topic sentence doesn't clearly refer to your thesis statement, not only is it wrong, the whole paragraph is. So here we go. The sisters' conflict with society is rooted in their upbringing. That's a transitional sentence I threw in there. It's going to go from one idea to the next. Howells characterizes a unique setting which shaped the girl's outlook. Upon closer inspection, the reader may glean a subtle conflict between Irene and Penelope. So my topic or my idea here is that he doesn't say it, but I'm going to show through the examples that they actually do have a conflict. So what are my examples? Both adored the mother. Irene depended on her mother and sister for opinions. Penelope dominated a conversation, was the center of attention. Irene buys her mother more clothes than she needs. Irene complains and scared away men. And she first derives her own ideas, which they said were wrong. Okay, now I have my two topic sentences. I have my examples. I can't use them all, so I have to decide what I'm going to do. That's next. Okay. I took the question without reading the text, and I wrote my thesis statement. Then I had 2 sentences before it, a big general idea, restate the idea in a different way, and then my thesis. That's my introductory paragraph. It specifically refers to the question. Now I'm going to have body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, and a conclusion. In 40 minutes, that's about it. That's all you're going to be able to do. So I'm thinking, that's what I'm thinking about. How much can I write in 40 minutes? You don't want to be halfway through an essay and not said anything, and then 40 minutes is up and then you're done. So, introduction. I'm going to do 3 to 4 sentences, a big idea. I'm going to narrow the big idea and repeat it. Then my thesis statement, which is going to be 2 or more sentences. Now I'm going to have my topic sentence, include a transitional phrase, 2 or more sentences is best. And that's for each of the body paragraphs. And the conclusion, restate the main idea, and at least 2 sentences for each body paragraph explaining how you answer the question and summarize. In an ideal word. If you're running out of time, you got your introduction, your 2 body, and you're on the conclusion. You look, oh man, I only got 5 minutes. Let's just get it done. Okay. So I need to choose the examples to use in the body paragraph. I have to have enough support for my topic sentence, but not too many that I can't finish the essay. That's the trick. That's why I did my thesis, my 2 topics, and now I say, well, how much time do I have left? Ooh, let's do 2 examples for the first one, and then we'll see how much time. You got to plan, you got to think. That's what I'm doing right here. All right, so I picked my examples, and I'm just following SEC. C is in blue, and you can see most of the paragraph is blue. Most of your essay should be commentary. These are the inferences you make about the example and how it supports your topic. To begin, Howells indicates through direct comment by the narrator that the 2 sisters are separate from societal norms. He writes, they were not girls who embroidered or abandoned themselves to needlework. Well, how does that example? Well, it doesn't say anything about society, does it? I'm making an inference, a guess. Here the tone of separation is inferred. It can be deduced that most young girls of the time would abandon themselves to such activities. This hints at a conflict that is further revealed through the characterization of Irene and Penelope and their family. Then I go back to another main idea. The characterization of the family atmosphere appears to be the basis for the social isolation. So they're separated, and I'm blaming it on the family. Here's the example. The narrator comments that the father does not like company, the mother is still too rustic, and Penelope does not like society. Not direct quotes, remember you're allowed to paraphrase, but now I have to explain how that supports my statement. It can be deduced from the text that the family had derived their fortune suddenly. Their newfound wealth thrust them into an environment which they were not accustomed. It appears that the father was consumed with business and left his wife and daughters on their own. It didn't say any of that, but that's what I'm guessing. If she's rustic, that means she came from the sticks. Now she's not in the sticks. Well, how did it happen? Well, the guy made money, and now they're rich. Well, he's still in business. If they're sitting at home taking naps together and looking out the window, and they're going on vacations, and the father's not there, he abandoned them to themselves. Those are inferences that explain what the green sentence indicates and how it supports the social isolation. Hence, without prior experience, the very strength of their mutual affection was a barrier to worldly knowledge. Comment, this ideal of helpless isolation is further developed when Howell writes, they lurked helplessly about the hotel parlors looking on and not knowing how to put themselves forward. Perhaps they did not care a great deal to do so. So here I have 2 examples and a sentence in between that kind of transitions. Now I have my big comment. It is apparent that the women are alone on vacation, further indicating the dysfunction of the family. I just wrote that in there. Why isn't the father there? Dysfunctional. Howells, through the narrator, proposes a conundrum to the reader. Characterization, direct comment. The tone of the sentence creates a sympathetic mood for the reader through the diction. Tone, mood, diction. Ooh, I'm getting all those in there. That's why we did all those exercises. If when in doubt, write about tone and mood, diction, syntax. There it is all right there. Do you have on your notepad the sentences, the mock sentences that from the definition and function of these literary terms that you can look at and incorporate within your essay? If you don't, you better. I mean, they're going to be right there. However, the following sentence seems to contradict the previous. Were the ladies helpless, or did they choose not to participate in society? The reader is left to ponder the woman's motives, yet the conflict between the girls and society is evident, whether intended or deliberate. All right, that should have been or not intended or deliberate. All right. That's my paragraph. That's the way I have a couple examples and I have my comments. Remember, comment is going to be longer than your example. It's going to be most of your paragraph. Let's look at the second. All right, let's take a look at the second body paragraph. And remember, SEC. That's all I'm doing. The extended paragraph. That's it. I'm just putting a couple of them together. Essay's done. Introduction, thesis, and conclusion. That's it. The sisters' conflict with society is rooted in their upbringing. Now that sentence refers back to the previous paragraph when they're talking about the family, so it's like a transition. Hal characterizes a unique setting which shaped the girl's outlook. Upon closer inspection, the reader may glean a subtle conflict between Irene and Penelope. Penelope is the older sister and is characterized as the leader of the two sisters. Hal states that she is on a self-guided search for self-improvement, yet upon her arrival home, she ridicules the very ideals she ventures out to obtain. She made fun of everything, the narrator declares. So here, notice I paraphrased and a direct quote. That's a real good way to get a lot of ideas in one example. Considering the attitudes of her parents, the reader may infer that Penelope is pandering to their views. This indulgence appears to be the impetus of the conflict between the two sisters. So that's an inference that I made. It didn't say that, but that's what a comment does. Next example. Hal follows this sentence with, Irene complained that she scared away the young men whom they got acquainted with at the dancing school sociables. The tone, writing about tone. When in doubt, write about tone and mood. The tone of the word complain leaves the reader with a negative impression, mood. The mood the reader feels is one conflict between the sisters. Irene is maturing and is becoming interested in social gatherings, whereas Penelope did not care for society. That's an inference. Didn't say that. That's just what I thought it said. Hal indicates this maturing when he writes, in this way, she began the first time to form ideas which she had not derived from a family. Until this time, Irene had only developed opinions from her mother and her sister. Well, what does that mean? My comment. It is this breaking away from the family mold that is the root of the conflict between the two sisters. This is apparent through the narrator describing Irene's complaining and her ability to attempt to enter society. SEC. Let's look at the conclusion. Now, when you're writing this essay, you have to really watch the time. Because when you get to your conclusion, you don't want to just leave it undone. But if you're running out of time, you do what you can do. So here's what I wrote. It can be seen through the characterization techniques that Hal incorporates in this passage that the family dynamics presented in the undertone of conflict. The conflict between the family and society. So I'm restating the thesis and the idea in the question. It is this conflict that affects the work as a whole. Whoa, now I got that part of my essay, or the question in there, affects the work as a whole. It's in my conclusion. So now I am answering the question. For it is the impetus of the complexity to the sisters' relationship to society and each other. Penelope and Irene adore their mother. Their reactions to society mimic the parents' opinions. However, Irene, as she matures, is becoming independent. This then spurns the conflict between the two sisters, which affects the work as a whole. Again, work as a whole. Irene begins to develop her own opinions as she strives to interact with the young man. The narrator indicates that these opinions, although her own, are often wrong. This leaves the reader with a question. Whose opinion does the narrator express? And I just kind of threw that in there because that sentence kind of just stuck out to me. And that's how you put it together. SEC. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Let's recap. Okay, rule number 1. You have to think. Don't just start writing. You won't have a good essay. You won't answer the question. You have to plan. So either use the interpretive sentence model or the who, what, where, when, why, and how to develop your thesis statement. This comes directly from the question. Oftentimes, you don't even need to read the section to make this statement because you're taking the ideas that are in the thesis statement and incorporating them in the question and incorporating them in your thesis statement. Then you throw a couple of sentences above it, a big idea, restate the big idea, and then now you have your introductory paragraph all done. Develop the 2 topic sentences for each of your paragraphs. Use who, what, where, when, why, and how. Do this, please. It makes it fast. It makes it easy. You can do more than one sentence with the questions that you answer. Then you want to provide the examples from the text, either a quote or a paraphrase. Now, when you go to your comment, how does the example support the topic? Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who is how, the author. What is he doing? How is he doing it? If you do that, use that technique, you're going to get more than one sentence for your commentary. In your conclusion, restate your main idea and explain how each paragraph develops the thesis. If you're running out of time, always watch the time. You may not do 2 sentences per paragraph, but you just still need to restate the main idea and how you answer the question. Anyway, that's how I would put together an answer to that question. What I want you to do now, this is for a grade, so is leave a comment comparing how you did your essay to how I did mine. Because the techniques that I taught you all year long, that's how I did it. This is for a grade. I want you to compare how you put your essay together as to how I did mine, and tell me your thoughts. Till next time, bye.